It's one of the most deadly viruses on the planet, Ebola. The latest outbreak started small with a few clusters of cases in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Then it was dozens of cases, now hundreds, including in neighboring Uganda. Dozens of people have died. So how well can it be contained? And is there hope of finding a new vaccine to stop it? Simon Clark is an infectious disease expert and microbiologist at the University of Reading in the UK. Simon, if we were looking at this on a scale of totally under control all the way to actively spreading and posing a global threat, where would you say we are right now in this outbreak?
Well, I don't think it's well controlled. There's certainly no evidence for that. It has been spreading. It's difficult to know exactly what's going on in the areas where there's this outbreak. So that makes it difficult to predict what's going to happen. Other parts of Africa, we've seen set up facilities for quarantining people. So that suggests to me that maybe they're concerned that there has been spread to other parts of Central Africa, but we've not yet seen any diagnosed cases there. And indeed, while there have been suspected events or escape from Africa, transmission, so that it ends up abroad in Brazil and Italy in particular. The cases in Brazil have been shown to be not due to Ebola. One of the things that is notable with Ebola is that it's actually quite difficult to diagnose from the initial symptoms because they're quite general and non-specific. So they can be caused by lots of other things, like, for instance, malaria, which is not unheard of in that part of the world.
So it's kind of hard, I'm hearing that it's kind of hard to gauge actually how serious this is. How worried should people be about this outbreak, both in Central Africa and in the wider world?
Well, if I was in Central Africa, I'd be much more concerned than in the wider world. While we have in the past seen transmission out of Africa, it's fairly rare, it's uncommon, but it can happen, and it could happen with this. But of course, it is transmitting and it is killing people in Central Africa. Part of the problem here is that there's no quick and easy test for this. There is a test, but it requires a proper laboratory setup, which in the field in certain parts of Africa just simply won't exist.
For people who aren't familiar, what exactly are the symptoms and how quickly does it spread? The initial symptoms are the sort of general infection symptoms that one gets: headache, nausea, stiff joints, things like that. That's your body's immune system reacting to the infection. And of course, it does that with all sorts of other types of infection as well. But if it progresses to the more severe, the later stages of the disease, then it basically causes hemorrhaging of your internal organs. That's what leads to death. And that's why the fatality rate is so high, or can be very high, with certain strains of it. The Bundibugyo version of the virus that we're seeing is actually on the lower end of the fatality level. I mean, we're talking, we don't really know, 25 to 50% is what I'm reading, but other strains of Ebola can be as high as 90%, which is extremely high for any infectious disease. But how it spreads, it's actually quite difficult to spread compared to other things. This is not caused, or transmitted rather, by coughs and sneezes. This is caused by contact with bodily fluids. So you're more likely to get transmission within a household than within the community more generally. So while it can spread, it does spread, obviously, it's not as easy as it could be. You touched on this a little bit there. There are a few things about this outbreak that are different from previous outbreaks. One is the particular strain. Can you walk us through what's unique about this outbreak?
That it is caused by a strain that we don't see very often. So my understanding is that the tests and the treatments that are already
available for treating Ebola are normally geared to another strain, and they are of limited efficacy, if indeed any efficacy, against Bundibugyo. So the Zaire strain, which is what we see more often, and it is indeed more fatal, more lethal, is what the treatments and the vaccines are geared towards. I think I'm right in saying that it's not very effective, if effective at all, against Bundibugyo.
Right, there are some vaccines against the more common Zaire strain. Why aren't there any vaccines against this strain?
Well, presumably because we don't hear of it very often. We know about this. This is not brand new, but I think that it's fair to say that outbreaks in the past have been more likely to be caused by Zaire. So it's quite simple that resource for any of these things, not just Ebola, but resource follows need, and therefore the vaccine will have been developed against the strain which people think is more likely to cause problems.
Is there any reason why it would be harder to develop a vaccine against this particular strain?
I shouldn't think so. No, there might be, and we don't know about it. We don't. None of these things is guaranteed when we develop vaccines, and vaccines are a bit of there's an art to them. That they either work or they don't, and why they work or why they don't is not always obvious. In fact, it's quite often not obvious. So the reason why one strain over another may or may not work, we don't know. But there is no reason why we shouldn't try, and there's every chance that it would work.
So there is now attention to this strain. There are resources being mobilized toward developing a vaccine against this strain. What's the timeline here that we're looking at? Because I think when people hear vaccine development, some people think this is going to happen overnight. Some people think it's going to be endlessly long. What's a realistic timeline?
So I would think months. We already know how to make a vaccine against Ebola because we have it against the other strain. So it's reasonable to assume that the strategy that exists for preventing or vaccinating against Zaire would work against Bundibugyo. I suspect that's where they'll start. They'll just try and copy the way that the vaccine is made. In developing vaccines can take years, and traditionally it has. But when there is a need for it, when the need is pressing, then we find, as we did with COVID, that the shoulder can be put to the wheel, and that the development, which would normally happen in sequence, the different stages of developing and trialing a vaccine can be done in parallel, and that shortens the time frame.
When you look at the international response to this outbreak, would you say that the shoulder is at the wheel at this point? Are we at the point that there is really enough pressure to make this happen faster?
Well, I think it will happen faster. Whether there is enough, whether we have, infectious diseases scientists have paid enough attention to this and other similar sorts of virus is really a value call, a moot point. I think really there is always a competition for resources. And those infections that cause the highest number of infections, morbidity and mortality will always take the lion's share of resources for developing vaccines and developing treatments. But of course, Ebola, I think, has a place in people's consciousnesses and worries people because the lethality rate is so high, and the end, if you're unfortunate enough to get it, can be so unpleasant. It does frighten people.
Simon, when we look at the next weeks and months, what do you think will be signs for us to look for that this outbreak is actually under control? How will we know?
We'll know whether the numbers of new infections starts to decrease. We also need to keep an eye on the number of tests being carried out, because we need to know that enough tests are being carried out to properly detect any increase. This is not a trivial affair, taking samples in rural Central Africa and taking them to a laboratory for analysis. people are used now to having tests for viruses through COVID, those lateral flow tests, which a lot of people had around the world. Nothing like that exists for Ebola. It needs a laboratory diagnosis. That's not easy, and enough tests need to be carried out for the data to be meaningful.
When do you think we will know?
Over the next weeks and months. The World Health Organization will mobilize its resources. There will always be a call for more resources. And I'm afraid it is a sad fact that unless a virus like this really started causing problems in the developing world, then the provision of those resources will always be difficult. That's just, it's not very nice, but it's true. But we will know, provided enough tests are done over the next weeks and months, whether the health authorities in Central Africa are putting a lid on the situation.
Simon Clark, thanks for talking to DW.
You're welcome.
What do you think? Are you worried about the spread of Ebola? Can a vaccine be developed in time to make a difference? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to keep following us on this story across all our platforms. I'm David Levitz in Berlin. Thanks for watching. See you soon.